Everything you have been told about envy is wrong. You have been told it is a moral failing, a character flaw, something weak people feel when they cannot handle success. You have been told to simply be grateful, to focus on your own journey, to celebrate others. And yet, here you are, feeling that acidic burn in your chest when you see him succeed. There is a circuit in your brain actively producing this poison. Evolution put it there 200,000 years ago, and it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is not that you are broken. The problem is that you are running Stone Age software in a digital world, and nobody bothered to explain the operating system. His name does not matter. Maybe he is your colleague who got the promotion you deserved. Maybe he is your brother who became everything your parents wanted. Maybe he is just some stranger on the internet with a better body, more money, a more attractive partner, or a life that looks effortlessly perfect. The specifics are irrelevant. What matters is the biological response happening inside you right now. Your amygdala, that ancient alarm system buried deep in your brain, is screaming danger. Not physical danger, social danger, status danger. The kind of danger that 50,000 years ago on the African savanna meant the difference between reproduction and genetic extinction. Let me tell you what is actually happening when you feel envy. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is performing an evolutionary calculation with terrifying precision. It is comparing your social rank to his, measuring the resource gap, and releasing a cocktail of stress hormones designed to motivate action. Cortisol floods your system, creating that tight feeling in your chest. Your ventral striatum, the reward center, goes dark when you think about his success, the same way it would if someone stole food from your hands. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the part that processes social pain, lights up like a Christmas tree. Neuroscience has proven something philosophers suspected for millennia. Watching someone else win feels to your brain like you are losing, not metaphorically, literally. The same neural pathways that activate when you experience physical pain activate when you experience social comparison pain. Here is what they will not tell you in those toxic positivity seminars. Envy is not about wanting what he has. If it were that simple, you would just go get it. Envy is about the existential terror of being exposed as inferior. It is about the story you told yourself about who you are, crashing against the evidence of who you actually are in the dominance hierarchy. You thought you were special. You thought your hard work mattered. You thought the universe had some kind of meritocratic justice built into it. And then he showed up, and his mere existence proved you wrong. He did not even have to try. He just is. And that fact alone makes you want to destroy him. Or destroy yourself, or both. The philosopher Kierkegaard said, envy is a form of sadness that seeks to diminish what it cannot possess. But he was being polite. Envy is rage wearing a mask of sadness. It is the biological equivalent of your brain saying, if I cannot have status, then status itself must be worthless. If I cannot win, then the game must be rigged. The Stanford biologist Robert Sapolsky spent decades studying primate hierarchies, and he found something disturbing. When a low-ranking baboon watches a high-ranking baboon receive a reward, the low-ranking baboon does not just feel bad. His stress hormone levels spike exactly as if he were being attacked. His body cannot tell the difference between watching someone else succeed and being physically harmed. You are not weak for feeling envy. You are a mammal with a primate brain designed to obsess over rank. Now, let me show you where this gets truly brutal. The humans who feel the most envy are not the ones at the bottom. They are the ones close enough to the top to see it clearly. If you were homeless, you would not envy a billionaire. The gap is too large. The comparison is not even on your radar. But if you are middle class and your neighbor just bought a Tesla, your brain goes into meltdown because he is in your reference group. He is supposed to be like you. And if he is better than you, then what does that say about you? This is why you do not envy Elon Musk, but you do envy your college roommate who became slightly more successful than you. Proximity breeds comparison. Comparison breeds envy. Envy breeds suffering. Your brain has a built-in bias called the fundamental attribution error. When you succeed, you attribute it to your hard work, your talent, your discipline. When he succeeds, you attribute it to luck, privilege, connections, maybe even unethical behavior. This is not because you are a bad person. This is because your brain is trying to protect your self-image from the crushing weight of evidence that maybe, just maybe, he is actually better than you at something that matters. Your ego cannot survive that truth, so it builds elaborate defense mechanisms. He had rich parents. He got lucky. He sacrificed his integrity. The game was rigged in his favor. Anything to avoid the possibility that he simply worked harder or thought smarter or wanted it more. Let me tell you something that nobody wants to hear. Sometimes he actually is superior, not as a human being. Human worth is not a hierarchy, but at this specific skill, in this specific domain, at this specific moment in time, yes, he is better than you. And your brain knows it. That is why you feel envy instead of admiration. Admiration is what you feel when someone is so far above you that competing is pointless. You admire Mozart because you will never be Mozart, but you envy the guy in your office who plays guitar slightly better than you because that gap feels crossable, and yet you are not crossing it. Envy lives in the space between who you are and who you think you should be. It is the gap made visible by someone else's success. The ancient Stoics understood this better than modern psychology. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil." But that was not the interesting part. The interesting part was what he wrote next. He said, "I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. Not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine." In other words, the person you envy is not your enemy. He is your mirror. He is showing you what is possible with the same biological hardware you possess. The rage you feel is not really about him. It is about the gap between your potential and your reality. Here is where it gets interesting from a neurochemical perspective. Envy activates your brain's punishment system. When you see him succeed, your nucleus accumbens, which normally fires when you experience reward, actually suppresses its activity. You experience anti-reward. But here's the twist. Studies show that when people who envy someone later witness that person fail or suffer, their brain's reward centers light up. This is called Schadenfreude, and it is one of the darkest aspects of human neurology. You feel pleasure when he falls, not because you gained anything, not because justice was served, simply because his pain reduces the status gap that was torturing you. Your brain treats his suffering like a reward. This is not evil, this is biology. But understanding it is the first step to transcending it. Let me pause here for a second and ask you a question that maybe no one has ever asked you. What is the worst part of living with this internal struggle? Not what you tell people, but the part you carry in silence. I want you to know something. What you are feeling is more common than you imagine. Thousands of people are watching this video right now carrying exactly the same weight. If you have the courage, leave a comment telling me what is the hardest part for you. Your honesty might make someone else feel less alone today. Now, let me continue showing you how to break this pattern. The first protocol is brutal honesty. You cannot fix what you will not name. Stop calling it motivation. Stop calling it healthy competition. Stop pretending you are just confused about why he bothers you. You envy him. Say it out loud. I envy him because he has something I want, and I do not believe I can get it. The moment you name it, you take away its power. Envy grows in darkness, fed by shame and denial. The second you expose it to light, it starts to wither. This is not about feeling good. This is about accuracy. Your brain is running a program. You need to see the code. The second protocol is to kill the comparison at its source. Your brain compares you to him because evolution wired you to track relative status. In a tribe of 150 people, knowing your rank was survival critical. But you do not live in a tribe anymore. You live in a global digital panopticon where you are simultaneously comparing yourself to 8 billion people. Your biological machinery was not built for this. It is like running a calculator designed for addition and subtraction and forcing it to compute quantum physics. It overheats, it breaks. So here is what you do. You manually restrict your reference group. You choose, consciously and deliberately, who you compare yourself to. Not him, not the people on social media, not the anomalies and outliers. You compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That is the only comparison your brain can handle without melting down. The third protocol is what the Stoics called negative visualization. Imagine in vivid detail losing everything you currently have, your health, your relationships, your basic freedoms. Now imagine him with all his success, but facing those same losses. Suddenly, his Tesla does not seem so important. Suddenly, the promotion does not matter. This is not about making yourself feel better through fake gratitude. This is about recalibrating your brain's reward system to recognize what actually matters. Seneca wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the smallest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" Your brain fears his superiority because it thinks status equals survival. Prove to your brain that you can survive, even thrive, with less. The fear dissolves. The fourth protocol is to study him, not to copy him, not to compete with him, to understand the mechanics of his success. Remove all emotion. Pretend you are a biologist studying a successful organism. What does he do differently? What habits does he have that you lack? What risks did he take that you avoided? What sacrifices did he make that you were unwilling to make? This is not about self-flagellation. This is about data collection. Most people who feel envy spend their energy either hating the person or making excuses. Both are wastes of biological resources. Instead, treat him like a case study. Extract the principles, apply them to your own life. If he is actually superior in some domain, then learn from superiority. That is what intelligent organisms do. The fifth protocol is the hardest. Accept that you might never be as good as him at this specific thing. And that is fine. Your worth as a human being is not determined by being the best at anything. This is the lie that modern culture sells you, that you must be exceptional, that average is failure, that if you are not the best, you are worthless. It is a lie that makes you miserable and makes corporations rich. You are a finite biological system with limited time and energy. You cannot be the best at everything. You probably cannot be the best at most things. And you know what? The universe does not care. Your value does not come from external achievement. It comes from internal coherence. Are you living according to your principles? Are you growing? Are you contributing? Those are the only questions that matter. He can be better than you at making money, building muscle, attracting partners, whatever. It does not diminish you unless you let it. Here is what neuroscience tells us about breaking the envy cycle. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity. It can rewire itself based on repeated patterns. Every time you feel envy and choose not to indulge it, you weaken that neural pathway. Every time you feel envy and consciously redirect your attention to your own growth, you strengthen a new pathway. This is not motivational nonsense. This is observable biology. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates emotional responses, can learn to suppress the amygdala's alarm signals. But it requires repetition. It requires discipline. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of envy, acknowledge it, and then choose a different response over and over and over, for weeks, for months, until the new pattern becomes automatic. The ancient practice of amor fati, love of fate, is not about pretending everything is great. It is about accepting reality exactly as it is, including the fact that he is more successful than you right now, and then choosing to extract value from that reality. You do not have to like it. You do not have to celebrate it. You just have to stop fighting it, because every moment you spend resenting his success is a moment you are not spending building your own. Envy is a tax you pay on your attention. The higher the envy, the less attention you have for productive action. This is why envious people rarely become successful. They are too busy watching someone else's highlight reel to create their own. Let me tell you about a study done at Stanford on social comparison and happiness. Researchers found that people who frequently compared themselves to others had higher rates of depression, anxiety, and stress-related illness. But here is the interesting part. It was not the comparison itself that caused the damage. It was the interpretation of the comparison. People who saw someone else's success and thought, "That means I am failing," suffered. People who saw someone else's success and thought that shows me what is possible did not suffer. Same stimulus, different interpretation, different neurochemical response. Your brain is not a passive receiver of reality. It is an active constructor of meaning. You can choose what his success means. It can mean you are inferior, or it can mean the game is worth playing. Here is the part that will make you uncomfortable. Sometimes envy is useful, not as a permanent state, not as an identity, but as a diagnostic tool. If you feel intense envy toward someone, that person is revealing something you want, but have not admitted to yourself. Your conscious mind might say you do not care about money, but if you feel rage every time your friend talks about his new business, guess what? You care about money. Your conscious mind might say you do not care about physical appearance, but if you feel sick every time you see someone more attractive, guess what? You care about appearance. Envy is your unconscious mind sending you a memo. This matters to you. Do something about it or stop pretending it does not matter. Either option is fine, but the middle ground, where you pretend not to care while secretly seething, that is where suffering lives. The final protocol is the most important. Build something, create something, contribute something. Envy thrives in passivity. It dies in action. When you are actively working toward a goal that matters to you, you do not have the mental bandwidth to obsess over what he is doing. Your brain's reward system is too busy firing dopamine every time you make progress. This is not about hustle culture. This is not about grinding yourself into dust. This is about the simple biological fact that humans need purpose to function. Without it, your brain turns inward, and inward is where envy lives. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Stop watching his life. Start building yours." Let me tell you what will happen if you do not address this. The envy will metastasize. It will spread from this one person to every person who has what you want. You will become that person who cannot celebrate anyone's success, who sees conspiracy and unfairness everywhere, who turns every conversation into a complaint about how the world is rigged against you. And you know what the worst part is? You will be right. From your perspective, the world will look rigged because your brain will filter every piece of information through the lens of resentment. You will notice every advantage he has and ignore every advantage you have. You will remember every time luck favored him and forget every time luck favored you. This is called confirmation bias, and it is one of the most destructive cognitive patterns a human can run. It does not make you a bad person. It makes you a prisoner of your own neurology. But here is the good news. You are not stuck. Your brain is not fixed. The pathways that generate envy can be rewired. The interpretations that cause suffering can be changed. The habits that keep you trapped can be broken. It requires work. It requires honesty. It requires you to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it with distraction or substances or more social media comparisons. But it is possible. People do it every day. They go from envious and miserable to focused and productive. Not because they became better than everyone else, because they stopped needing to be. Sapolsky talks about the concept of the internal locus of control. People who believe their outcomes are determined by their own actions are happier and more successful than people who believe their outcomes are determined by external forces. Envy is what happens when you have an external locus of control. You believe he has something you want, and the only reason he has it, and you do not, is because of factors outside your control: luck, privilege, genetics, the system. And maybe that is partially true, but the moment you make that your dominant narrative, you give away your power. You become a passive observer of your own life. The shift from envy to agency happens when you reclaim your locus of control, when you say, "Okay, he has advantages I do not have. Now what am I going to do with the advantages I do have?" Here is a thought experiment. Imagine you could push a button and instantly have his life, his money, his looks, his success, his relationships, everything. But here is the catch. You also get his problems, his anxieties, his regrets, his private struggles that nobody sees. Would you still push the button? Most people, when they really think about it, would not. because what you envy is the highlight reel. What you would get is the full movie. And his full movie, just like yours, is a mix of wins and losses, joy and suffering, meaning and emptiness. The grass is not greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. That is not a platitude. That is a biological fact about attention and neuroplasticity. There is a reason the Stoics spent so much time training their minds to accept reality without resentment. They understood that suffering is not caused by events. It is caused by your interpretation of events. He got the promotion. That is a fact. Your interpretation is, that means I am not good enough, but that interpretation is optional. You could also interpret it as, that means I need to develop different skills, or that means this company does not value what I offer, or that means I should start my own thing. Same fact, infinite interpretations, most of which do not involve suffering. Your brain defaults to the interpretation that protects your ego in the short term, but destroys you in the long term. You have to consciously override that default. The most dangerous thing about envy is that it masquerades as justice. You do not think you are being petty. You think you are being righteous. He does not deserve what he has. The system is unfair. You were cheated, and maybe all of that is true. But even if it is true, what are you going to do about it? Spend your life bitter and resentful? Spend your energy tearing him down instead of building yourself up? That is not justice. That is self-destruction. Seneca wrote, "Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured." Envy is the same. You think you are hurting him, even hating him. You are only hurting yourself. If you made it this far, I already know something important about you. You do not just want to survive your own mind, you want to master it. This channel is not about magic promises. It is about real people sharing real tools that work in the real world. If this makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel, not because I am asking, but because you deserve a place where you can learn to build the version of yourself you always knew was in there. Biology is destiny until you hack it. One final thing before we end. Envy is not the enemy. Passivity is the enemy. Denial is the enemy. The refusal to look at your own shadow is the enemy. Envy is just data. It is your brain telling you something about what you value and where you are falling short. Listen to it. Extract the information, then let it go. Because holding on to envy is like drinking poison and expecting him to die. He is fine. He is probably not even thinking about you. The only person suffering from your envy is you. And you have better things to do with your finite biological existence than suffer over someone else's success. This content is for educational and philosophical purposes. It is a creative exploration of human psychology and evolutionary biology, not medical or psychological advice. If you are struggling with mental health issues, please seek professional